Good afternoon and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Nella, Communication Officer at ACE, and I will be the MC for the workshop today. It is my pleasure to welcome all of you here this afternoon. I would like to thank you for joining us today for this special occasion on our workshop, Roadmaps Towards Sustainable and Energy Efficient Buildings and Cooling in Southeast Asia, which is hosted by Brunei Darussalam and organized by ASEAN Center for Energy, the International Energy Agency, and the ASEAN Secretariat. I would like to thank you as well to our partner, the ASEAN Australian Development Cooperation Program Phase 2. The International Energy Agency, in partnership with the ASEAN Center for Energy, the ASEAN Secretariat, the Energy Efficiency and Energy Conservation Subsector Network, and with funding from the ASEAN Australian Development Cooperation Program Phase 2, is implementing a new project to develop detailed roadmaps for buildings and space cooling in the region. The workshop aims to bring together expert policymakers, academics, architects, engineers, and industry representatives from across Southeast Asia to share their knowledge, experience, and provide inputs into the roadmap process. This workshop is being recorded and the materials will be available on IEA and Esco website shortly after the event. Before we get started, I'm going to go through some of our agenda today. First, we will have the welcoming remarks, keynote address, breakout sessions, breakout summary, and the closing remarks. Here we have two breakout sessions where participants will be given an option to select breakout session 1 or 2. The first one is the Space Cooling Roadmap for Southeast Asia. This session will discuss the importance of sustainable cooling for Southeast Asia and examine the design and implementation of effective policy package for sustainable cooling with a technology focus on air conditioners and electric fans. And the second is the Buildings and Construction Roadmap for Southeast Asia. This session will discuss the importance of energy efficient building design, development and construction, operation and energy systems in Southeast Asia, and examine the design and implementation of effective policy package to support net zero carbon, energy efficient and resilient buildings and construction. Now I would like to remind you some of our guidelines for our meeting today. First, I would like to suggest everyone to silence your cell phone to reduce the noises. Second, participants should turn off their microphone and camera and only turn them on if they wish to present or speak. And the last one, if you wish to ask the presenters a question, please kindly use the chat room and then the speakers will answer your questions. At this time, I would like to invite Mr. Abdul Salam bin Abdul Wahab, Head of Sustainable Energy Division, Ministry of Energy, Brunei Darussalam, to deliver the first welcoming remarks.
Thank you very much, Nila. His Excellency Dr. Nuki Agyautama, Executive Director of ASEAN Center for Energy, ACE, Dr. Pong Pan Borasayan, the Senior Professional Electrical Engineer of Alternative Energy Development and Efficiency of Thailand, as the Chair of the ECSSN, Ms. Caroline Scott, Deputy Head of Mission, Australian Mission to ASEAN, distinguished ECSSN focal points from all ASEAN member states, distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen. A very good afternoon and warm greetings from Brunei Darussalam. It is a privilege for me to deliver this welcoming remark for ACE IEA workshop, emphasizing on the roadmaps towards sustainable and energy efficient building and cooling in Southeast Asia, in association with the 25th Energy Efficiency and Conservation Subsector Network meeting this year, being hosted by Brunei Darussalam. This workshop serves to allow for regional stakeholders to learn about the roadmap process fit into its design and to hear from leading expert policymakers, academics, architects, engineers, and industry representatives from across Southeast Asia. Brunei Darussalam fully acknowledge the contribution from the ASEAN-Australia Development Cooperation Program Phase 2, AADCP2, for funding the implementation and development of the detailed roadmaps for buildings and space cooling in the region via the International Energy Agency, IEA, in partnership with the ASEAN Center for Energy, ACE, the ASEAN Secretariat, and the EEC subsector network. These collaborative works are for certain of great benefit to all ASEAN member states in developing and implementing strategies, plans, policies, and programs to reduce the energy demand from building and cooling. In addition, collaboration on regional standards fosters shared resources and knowledge and help widen the market for building materials and services. With the world still facing a global challenge with the ongoing pandemic COVID-19, it is crucial more than ever that we work together towards achieving a more sustainable and resilient energy sector towards the region economic recovery. As we are all aware, the space cooling is the fastest growing energy use in building in Southeast Asia. Proven energy efficiency policy option, including building energy codes, minimum energy performance standard maps, and disclosure of building energy consumption need to be effectively established and developed in order to reduce the energy burden from economic and demographic growth. Ladies and gentlemen, with Brunei Darussalam ASEAN Chairmanship theme of We Care, we prepare and we prosper, Brunei Darussalam will continue to prioritize energy transition and energy security as part of the priority. In view of the growing concerns of climate change as well as volatile energy prices, energy efficiency is regarded as one of the vital strategies for energy transition to support the region's sustainable development. In effort towards pushing for energy transition and energy security, ASEAN member states should not only focus on shifting from fossil fuel to renewable, but it is also important to put focus on energy management, in particular on energy efficiency and on cooling. It is also hoped to create a platform to explore the possibility of initiating a concrete resourcing, including financial and investment mechanism to support the energy efficiency and conservation agenda within ASEAN region. Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I understand that there are two breakout sessions to be held this afternoon. The first breakout session will focus on space cooling roadmap, which will explore the role of policies such as energy efficiency standards and labeling programs and how this can be expanded and improved. Meanwhile, the second breakout session will focus on building and construction roadmap for Southeast Asia, which will discuss the importance of energy efficiency in building design, development and construction, operation and energy system in order to determine effective policy packages to support net zero carbon, energy efficient and resilient building and construction. Both breakout sessions will provide an important platform for all ASEAN member states to identify appropriate policies that can be adopted towards the full establishment of sustainable and energy efficient building and cooling roadmaps in their respective countries. I hope that the ASEAN member state, with the support from ASEAN Center for Energy, as well as our dialogue partners and international organizations, will continue to strengthen our effort in energy efficiency and conservation program area. It is important that we keep the momentum going in engaging with all relevant organizations as well as in transitioning towards a more efficient use of energy by adopting various technologies and accelerating the whole process flow. Let us have an insightful and beneficial workshop this afternoon. With that, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Abdul Salam. For the second welcoming remarks, I would like to welcome Dr. Pongpan Farasayan. He is the Senior Engineer of the Energy Regulation and Conservation Division, Department of Alternative Energy Development and Efficiency, Ministry of Energy Thailand, and also a Chair of the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Subsector Network.
Thank you, Nela. Mr. Abdul Salam bin Haji Abdul Wahab, Head of Sustainable Energy Division, Ministry of Energy, Brunei Darussalam. Dr. Nuki Atya Uttama, Executive Director of ASEAN Center for Energy. Mr. Adrian Gilbert, First Secretary, Australian Mission to ASEAN. Good colleagues, ladies and gentlemen. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Department of Alternative Energy Development and Efficiency of Thailand as the EE&C Assistant Coordinator. It is our great pleasure to deliver welcoming remarks for roadmap toward sustainable and energy efficient building and cooling in Southeast Asian workshop today. First of all, I would like to express my sincere appreciation to Australian government for supporting the funding through ASEAN Australian Development Cooperation Program Phase 2 or AADCP2 for this project. As you may know, space cooling is considered to be the fastest growing energy used in building globally, with Southeast Asia requiring 200 gigawatts of additional electricity generating capacity by 2040 for cooling alone. The required additional generating capacity will place a heavy socio-economical burden on the ASEAN region, which will greatly affect the well-being of the people, the energy security of the region, the global warming, as well as the region's global competitiveness. This workshop brings together experts from various fields, ranging from policymaker, academic, engineer, to address how energy efficiency may help lessen the aforementioned burden and provide crucial insight into a possible roadmap towards sustainable and energy efficient building and cooling. This workshop is also a part of the activity under 2021 annual priority for energy on developing ASEAN EE building and ASEAN cooling roadmaps. It is also an activity to help the region for sustainable cooling and to help achieve our energy efficiency goal at 32% energy intensity by 2025 under Upper Egg Phase 2. Ladies and gentlemen, again, I would like to express my sincere appreciation for the support from the the Australian government. I also would like to thank IEA, ACE, and ASEAN Secretariat for your hard work and co-organize this workshop today. Last but not least, I would like to thank Brunei Darussalam for hosting this workshop. I hope that this workshop will serve as a platform for all participants to have discussion and exchange ideas on the roadmap. I wish us all fruitful discussion and deliberations. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Dr. Pongpan. For the last welcoming remarks, please join with us, Mr. Adrian Gilbert. He is the first secretary from the Australian mission to ASEAN.
Thank you. Mr. Abdul Salam bin Abdul Wahab, Ministry of Energy, Brunei Darussalam. Dr. Pongpan Vorosayan, Thailand Ministry of Energy. Dr. Nuki Agya Utama, ASEAN Centre for Energy. Ms. Melanie Slade of the International Energy Agency, and our friend and colleague, Ms. Mari Gail Disagon, Head of Energy and Minerals Division at the ASEAN Secretariat. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my great pleasure to welcome you all to the Roadmaps Towards Sustainable and Energy Efficient Buildings and Cooling in Southeast Asia workshop, which is supported by the ASEAN Cooperation Program, Phase 2, or AADCP2. Brunei is the host, the IEA, ASEAN Secretariat for today's workshop. This is the third collaboration between IEA and ASEAN, which AADCP2 has had the pleasure of supporting. It began with the development prospects of the ASEAN power system, completed in 2015, and continued with the feasibility study for ASEAN multilateral power trade in 2019. And now with the current project, which we're exploring today, on sustainable energy efficient buildings and cooling in ASEAN. We hope that this sustained partnership has been useful and productive in helping progress regional aspirations in the energy sector. AADCP2 is emblematic of the kind of partner Australia is for ASEAN. It is ASEAN-led, it's flexible in its approach, and it's committed to supporting ASEAN and its own priorities. For more than a decade, AADCP2 has been supporting ASEAN across a range of economic sectors, including agriculture, MSME development, services, and investments, alongside emerging cross-cutting initiatives such as connectivity, the fourth industrial revolution, and narrowing the development gap among ASEAN member states. and I'm pleased that energy has emerged as a significant area of support for AADCP2. And I hope to sustain this under a successor program to AADCP2, currently in design and expected to commence next year. AADCP2, along with other programs of Australian support for ASEAN, is closely aligned with ASEAN's priorities, including for COVID-19 recovery, as set out in the ASEAN Comprehensive Recovery Framework and its associated work plan. We welcome ASEAN's commitment in the ACRF to facilitate a transition to sustainable energy, and we stand ready to continue to support ASEAN efforts to take this forward, including through AADCP2 and its successor program commencing next year, and other Australian programs of support, such as Partnerships for Infrastructure, a new program which can support ASEAN member states take forward ASEAN commitments and priorities in infrastructure at the national level. So I warmly welcome you all to this workshop, and I wish you a productive and useful discussion. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Adrian. And now I would like to invite all of the speakers and moderators to turn on your camera, please, as we will have a group photo together. Okay. In 3, 2, 1. I guess one more time. In 3, 2, 1. Thank you very much, everyone. Moving right along, it is now my pleasure to invite Dr. Nuki Agia-Utama, the Executive Director from ACE, to bring the first keynote address on overview of energy and conservation strategy, program, and target under the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, or APAC Phase 2.
Thank you, Nila. Your Excellency, Mr. Abdul Salam bin Abdul Wahab, the Head of Sustainable Energy Division, Ministry of Energy Brunei Darussalam, Dr. Pong Pan, Palan, as Chair of the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Subsector, Mr. Adrian Gilbert, the First Secretary of Australian Mission to ASEAN, distinguished representative from the ENC SSN focal points, colleagues from ASEAN Secretariat, and also colleagues from IEA, and representative from member states. Good morning and good afternoon to you all. On behalf of the ASEAN Center for Energy, it is my great pleasure to welcome you today to the first workshop of our roadmaps towards sustainable and energy efficient buildings and cooling in Southeast Asia. I also would like to thank all participants for taking time out of their schedules to participate in this workshop. This virtual workshop is very timely and aligned with the ACE collaborative goals as the catalyst, knowledge hub, and think tank for energy cooperation, as it aims to bring together experts for policy makers, academics, architects, and engineers, as well as business representatives from across ASEAN region to share their knowledge and experience, as well as provide inputs into the roadmap process. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the 38th ASEAN Ministers on Energy meeting, or AMEM, which is hosted virtually by Vietnam last year, endorsed the ASEAN Plan of Action for Energy Cooperation, or APAC Phase 2, 2021-2025, with a sub-theme of accelerating energy transition and strengthening energy resilience through greater innovation and cooperation, to serve as the blueprint for the long-term transformation of ASEAN energy landscape towards sustainable future, serving as a blueprint for the long-term transformation. Under the APAC 2016-2025, this APAC Phase 2, starting this year, 2021, having a list of targets and activities was placed to enhance energy security, resilience, and sustainability for the region. The targets and activities were set forth through the 7 APEC-specific program areas, including energy efficiency and conservation, which is widely regarded as the most cost-effective way to address the energy crisis and to support the transition to a low-carbon economy, also including promote investment and to create growth, and of course, improve the employment. To achieve the target, ASEAN have the strategies to expand, to harmonize, and to promote energy efficiency standards and labeling on energy-related products, including cooling technologies such as air conditioner, and of course also strengthen sustainability for energy efficiency in building. These strategies show that efficient building and cooling is a very important matter in ASEAN to accelerate energy transition and strengthen energy resiliency. It is include also the strategies aims to strengthen cooperation through institutional capacity buildings and increasing private sector's involvement, including enhancing public awareness as well as expanding markets for energy efficient products to contribute to energy intensity reduction by 32% based on 2005 level. Meanwhile, we are pleased to have met our EI reduction target under the previous APEC 2016-2020, which achieved the 21% in 2018, based on 2005 levels. It is exceeding the 20% target of energy intensity set under the plan. To reach ASEAN currently proposed 32% energy intensity reduction by 2025 will require ASEAN to intensify the partnership and collaboration to expedite the whole process, in particular on harmonizing energy efficiency, policy, and planning, so that more can be done for achieving the ambitious energy intensity reduction in the region. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, the strategic roadmaps towards sustainable buildings and coolings are increasingly important. Energy demand in building, especially in the commercial and industrial sectors, is notably growing. Despite the relatively low share in total final energy consumption, the commercial sector is expected to see the highest growth compared to the other sectors. If the EE&C efforts are not met, commercial building will have the most notable demand growth, with a growth of 4.8% annually. Similarly, in the residential sectors, electricity is projected to grow steadily until it occupies the largest share of energy demand in the region. It is due to the increased electrification ratio, and the number of electrical appliances used and the number of households also increases. Related to the cooling system, the United Nations Environment Programme United for Efficiency, or UNEP U4E initiative estimate that by 2040, the ASEAN stock of cooling appliances, namely room air conditioners and residential refrigerators, will be almost triple compared to 2020. This will cause the electricity consumption from air conditioner to more than double. While the residential refrigerator is expected to increase by over 80%, the initiative also found annual saving potential at 144 terawatt hours and 17 terawatt hours of electricity consumption by 2040 from the transition to energy efficient air conditioners and residential refrigerators respectively, fully recognizing the potential. The efficient cooling system deployment and implementation of EE measures in the building sector is crucial. According to the ASEAN EE best practice report, the opportunities exist for significant energy saving measures and emission reduction in the buildings and cooling system by adapting new and refurbishing chiller system. Other measures such as replacing fluorescent bulb with LED, implementing high efficiency air conditioners, and adapting smart control system can also help reduce energy consumption in buildings and cooling system. Dear colleagues, ladies and gentlemen, most ASEAN member states have acknowledged the importance of energy efficiency by enacting EE laws, setting national EE targets and determining EE action plans to achieve their national EE development, and also, of course, regional goals under APEC Phase 2. ACE analysis undertaken under the 6th ASEAN Energy Outlook that suggests ambitious energy efficiency measures can potentially reduce building cooling energy demand in the region and achieve the regional energy intensity target by 2025. It also includes supporting the EE regional goal. ASEAN develops a sustainable energy efficiency building roadmap and sustainable cooling roadmap. These two roadmaps aim to provide policy recommendation as a pathway to efficient, flexible, and of course, low emission buildings. The process of developing the roadmaps is expected to engage key stakeholders and help them develop and implement strategies, plans, policy, and programs to reduce the energy demand of building, construction sectors, and cooling itself. Moving forward, the member states will conduct a series of information sharing that will enhance the AMS capacity to analyze and implement policies and incentives on sustainable EE in building towards net zero energy consumption, building energy codes, and building envelope system. The opportunities in the smart building sectors will be further explored to advance smart cities in ASEAN. Moreover, to achieve high impact energy efficiency improvement and energy saving, the IMS will examine the benefit of new technologies, market mechanism, and policy support to serve as a basis in strengthening cooperation amongst EE stakeholders. And to support the region, our institution, the ASEAN Center for Energy, has been working on a number of energy efficiency and conservation programs. To name a few, including the establishment of product registration system for cooling products supported by U4E and UNEP, and also harmonized CSPF standards supported by JAIF Japan. ACE also produced several publications to support the adoption of higher energy efficiency standards, promoting regional harmonization on energy efficiency product standards, greater private participation, and of course, sustainable building. So ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, I wish you a productive, insightful discussion today. Please feel free to share your knowledge, your opinion, and of course, your inputs to further benefit to the member states. Thank you very much for your attention. And lastly, I would like to express my sincerest gratitude and appreciation to the ASEAN Australian Development Cooperation Project Phase 2 or ADCP2 for their generous support to EENC development in ASEAN, and of course ASEAN Secretariat and IEA for being a good partner of ACE and co-hosting this workshop, and of course generosity in preparation and arrangement being made. Thank you very much once again for your kind attention. Stay safe and stay healthy. Back to you, Nela.
Thank you very much, Dr. Nuki. Let's continue with the second keynote address, which will be delivered by Melanie Slade. She is the Senior Program Manager, Energy Efficiency in Emerging Economies Program from the International Energy Agency.
Good afternoon, and thank you, everybody. Thank you, our hosts from Brunei, our funders from Australia, and our partners from the ASEAN Secretariat, from ACE, and of course, the expert group on energy efficiency and conservation. A very warm welcome again from the IEA to this very important workshop, which is one of the first opportunities for stakeholder consultation on the roadmaps that we've been developing together. I'm going to start in traditional IEA fashion by a big picture presentation before my colleagues go into details on the cooling and building sectors. So if I could have the next slide, please. And the next one. Thank you. So no IEA presentation is complete without taking a step back and looking at the context for this workshop. And what we're showing here is the work that we have to do collectively to go from where we think emissions are heading, which is the top blue line on here, what's known as the stated policy scenario, and where our global climate change commitments want us to be, which is the green line, the bottom line on this chart here. And clearly there's a huge difference between the two, but about 40% of that is made up of energy efficiency using known, proven technologies. So not waiting for innovation, things we know about that we can do now. So that's the background for what we're talking about today. So energy efficiency has a huge part to play, as our previous speakers have said. Next slide, please. Sadly, unfortunately, energy efficiency improvements have been reducing in recent years. So you may remember when the Sustainable Development Goals were established, there was a requirement for a doubling of the rate of energy productivity as a measure for energy efficiency. And we did manage that for a few years, but unfortunately, that rate of progress has been decreasing and then took a very, very hard hit last year because of the pandemic. So we have even more work to do. And we would estimate that we need to improve not at 2%, but now something like 4% or maybe more in order to make up for the difference. So that's just to set the scene for how important this work is and how timely it is and how we don't have time to wait. So near term is really, really important here. Next slide, please. There are governments are investing as a result of their recovery plans from COVID. And one of the major opportunities that we see is in job creation through sustainable energy, through clean energy transitions. And one of the best ways of creating jobs is to actually invest in energy efficiency, but in buildings in particular. The biggest gains that we see are in buildings, particularly in both new buildings and building retrofit. So that's just to say that if governments can use this opportunity to make improvements in investments, which have been reducing in recent times, and that's what we'd like to stimulate through this these roadmaps. That's one of the purposes of those, to see how we can gain the multiple benefits of energy efficiency. Next slide, please. We're seeing that spending is happening, but it's uneven. And some governments are seeing this opportunity, but one of the main parts of the world that's happening currently is the European Union. And it would be great to see if we can start to stimulate that sort of spending in Asean countries as well. So just to be clear, this is money that governments have decided to spend anyway to boost their economies. So it's not looking for new money, but it's focusing it on the opportunities that energy efficiency brings. Next slide, please. So what we're seeing here is the opportunities by different sectors for CO2 reductions, now looking in buildings in particular. And so you can see that we have basically huge opportunities across the board: residential, non-residential, indirect and direct savings. Next slide, please. Now, what we're looking here, I mentioned earlier that we don't have to wait, and that's absolutely true. We have proven technologies that can do this work for us. So on the left-hand side, if we take cooling, because it's particularly important in this region, although these numbers are global, the yellow bar is showing what we can achieve in terms of CO2 reductions by improving the performance of existing technologies. And you can see that for cooling, that's the largest opportunity we have. And then if we look to the right-hand chart, we can see what we have available to us to reduce emissions reductions through technology maturity. And so in each case, the blue bar here is mature technology. So there are many opportunities using existing technology. And in the cases of heating and cooling in particular, early adoption of known technology that hasn't yet really penetrated markets is another big opportunity to us. And again, the roadmaps can help point to which technologies can give us the biggest benefits most quickly. So that's one of the purposes of doing this work. Next slide, please. Moving to Southeast Asia, what we're looking at is, we refer to this as a waterfall diagram. So basically we're going from where we think things were at in terms of emissions reductions in 2018, where they would go if we carry on with stated policies. That's the 2040 steps bar here. And then how do we get from there to the sustainable development scenario that we were talking about earlier? And equipment efficiency is, of course, a large proportion. Other buildings efficiency is also really important to us here. And then the rest comes from decarbonising the power sector, which, of course, the ASEAN region is doing a huge amount of work on and is progressing extremely strongly on. Next slide, please. So the Roadmap project aims to help address increasing energy demand and emissions reduction, improve collaboration between stakeholders in the region by developing these two roadmaps. And I just want to mention that collaboration, how important that is. We find particularly in the buildings and construction roadmap work that there are many communities that don't traditionally speak to each other. They're not used to being in the same room. They all have their own objectives and they don't necessarily get together on a regular basis. So one of the purposes of this work is to try and bring those communities together. And just to refer to a previous piece of work that ACE worked on with the German government, the ACAP buildings report, that was clear that the communities working on buildings and construction, not only were they not working together within each of the countries, they weren't taking the opportunities to work together across the region. And that's where we see a huge amount of gain being possible, you know, that best practice sharing, learning and developing new ideas together. And likewise, of course, in a much more focused way with the cooling roadmap, the policymakers working with the standards bodies, working with the designers, working with the government officials. So on that basis, we, you know, building on, you know, and recognizing there's a huge amount of work that's been going on in this field for so long. The idea is to make recommendations to make the roadmaps as concrete and actionable as possible. And what we'd like to achieve from today and from subsequent meetings is your input and insights to make this project as useful to the region as possible, as actionable as possible. The idea of the process is to be as inclusive, and this is just one of the first number of opportunities for engagement. And so we'd also like to say, if you know of other stakeholders who should be involved, please do let us know, share contacts, share the links to these presentations after they've happened. And we'd be very happy to incorporate their thinking in this work as well. Next slide, please. So with that, I will finish. Thank you all again. Thanks to partners, collaborators, for a really, you know, collegiate working spirit, and let's hope today is a really constructive building block for this roadmap development. Thank you all.
Thank you very much, Melanie. Ladies and gentlemen, before we come forward and begin our breakout session, I would like to remind you again that in the first session, we will present a snapshot of the role policies and programs can play in supporting sustainable space cooling in ASEAN, and explore how finance and innovative business models can help deliver sustainable cooling in the region. This session will be introduced by my colleagues, Michael Upperman. He is the energy analyst from the International Energy Agency. While on the second breakout session, we will present preliminary analysis mapping on the existing status of policies in the ASEAN member states and change over time, and seek feedback on gaps and potential data sources. This session will be introduced by Dr. Ian Hamilton from the University College of London. And now I think there would be a button appears on your screen, so you can choose which breakout session you would like to attend. The breakout rooms here is on the bottom side of the platform.
So I'd like to welcome everybody to Breakout Session 1, a Sustainable Cooling Roadmap for Southeast Asia. My name is Michael Upperman. I'm an energy policy analyst at the International Energy Agency in the Energy Efficiency Division with Mel Slade and the team here today. And we're very pleased you could all join us today, the audience members and our great lineup of panelists we have today as well. To cover off quickly on housekeeping, it would be great if everybody could please keep your microphones on mute and cameras off if you're not invited as a speaker today. If you do have a question or a comment that comes up during the session today, please feel free to post it in the chat window, and one of our team or the panelists can feel free to respond to your question when we get a moment. I did see a question pop up quickly about how to change breakout group sessions. You should be able to by clicking on the breakout room button at the bottom of the screen on Zoom to again scroll. Maybe I'm wrong. You might be able to click on the right of your name to assign yourself or move to another room, but I apologize if not, maybe one of my colleagues can answer in the chat window. In the interest of time, I'll keep this introduction short so we can move on to our great lineup of speakers and panel sessions today. So if we could have the next slide, please, Tia. And perfect, thank you. So we'll be, thank you. So this workshop today brings together a great range of speakers to kick off our stakeholder engagement in developing a sustainable space cooling roadmap for Southeast Asia. And you heard in the plenary session earlier, the great need for this roadmap at this point in time for the region. Today marks the first of our stakeholder engagements to support the development of both the buildings and construction and also the cooling roadmaps. And we'll be conducting further webinars from April to July 2021 with the publication of the roadmap report expected later in 2021. So please stay tuned for other opportunities to participate. This roadmap will cover off on a number of topics relating to air conditioners, fans, and sustainable space cooling. These include providing a baseline of cooling demand in the region and future projections and drivers of growth. And we'll also look to baseline current policy settings, as well as exploring opportunities for policy development to support sustainable space cooling in the region in the future. So to kick off this breakout group, our first speaker will be my colleague, Dr. Kevin Lane from the International Energy Agency. And he'll help to set the scene with an overview of cooling demand and a top-down view of how different policy tools can drive progress. We'll then move on to our first panel session where we'll dive into the details of the roles of how policies and programs can drive improvements in sustainable cooling in Southeast Asia. And our second panel session will examine the role of finance and innovative business models in this space as well. We'll also have opportunities for you, the audience, and stakeholders today to be able to participate through online Menti polls, and we're keen to get your insights. So to kick off, we thought we'd just make sure people can get accustomed to the Menti poll system. So we'd like to find out which country you're joining us from today and where you're dialing in from. So you can either use your web browser or on your smartphone, go to www.menti.com and use the code on screen, 30942852, or using your smartphone, you can scan the QR code to go to the poll. And away we'll go with Menti. So if you'd like to take a moment now to let us know where you're dialing in from today, that would be fantastic. And possibly my colleague Theo can quickly display that on screen. And without further ado, I'd like to now hand over to my colleague, Dr. Kevin Lane, to deliver this opening presentation. Thank you.
Thank you for that introduction, Michael. My name is Kevin Lane. I'm an energy efficiency analyst at the International Energy Agency. I'd also like to extend my warm welcome to everyone here as well. And I'm just going to give you a brief introduction to cooling in Southeast Asia. So as Michael said, more just to set the scene in terms of where we think energy consumption is going, where's cooling going, and then explore some of the opportunities we have to try and reduce that energy consumption. So the workshop today is to try and get some of your views ultimately on what would be a good roadmap for the next, say, 10 years to try and improve the energy efficiency. So next slide. So what I'm showing here is just some historical information about energy consumption or electricity consumption of air conditioning around the world. And if we look at Southeast Asia, if we go back to 1990, there's maybe only about 10 terawatt hours of electricity being used for cooling. If we run forward to today, that's somewhere around about 75 terawatt hours. There's been a dramatic increase in electricity consumption in Southeast Asia, but also globally for cooling. And I guess that's driven by two things. One is perhaps slightly warmer temperatures, but also, most importantly, as countries become wealthier, they're able to afford cooling. And in places like Southeast Asia, it's not only a luxury to have cooling, it's increasingly a necessity to have this cooling. So we'd expect this trend to continue. If we look at the underlying ownership across the ASEAN region, it might only be, say, 15% across the whole of the region, but quite a wide disparity. So say 80% in Singapore, down to maybe 10% or so in Malaysia and Vietnam. If we go to the next slide. If we now look at the stock of air conditioners in the ASEAN region, and what we see at the moment, there might only be, say, 40 million air conditioners. This is the 15% of households that have them. But if we go forward to 24, we expect this to rise dramatically as the region becomes wealthier and people do purchase more equipment. So by 2040, it could be, say, 300 million air conditioners in the region, meaning about 60% of households will have an air conditioner, and with maybe 2 per household that will be having an air conditioner. So it's a dramatic rise in ownership of such equipment that's going to happen over the next 20 years or so. And this is not only just in ASEAN, but globally as well. So this really is an important sector for policymakers to understand and the implications of this sector. So if you go to the next slide. And this is just to reinforce out of all the end users, it's probably cooling that's going to be one of the largest increases over the next 20 years. So cooling is really a key priority sector for us to understand. So if you go to the next slide. And what this is showing is just what is the headline electricity consumption that's expected out to 2040. So it could be as over almost 350 terawatt hours of electricity by 2040. So that's a dramatic increase, so maybe 250 terawatt hours increase over the period. And that's a substantial amount. That's maybe the same amount of electricity, it's a huge amount. But if we improve the efficiency of equipment, we could reduce electricity consumption by 110 terawatt hours by 2040. So that's just by improving efficiency, no other measures. And that 110 terawatt hours would be the equivalent of, say, Malaysia, Philippines, and Vietnam's current electricity combined. So it is a very large amount of savings, possibly just from efficiency. Of course, you could make the buildings more efficient by having better insulation, better fabric. That would also save energy as well. And as Melanie showed in the introduction as well, decarbonising the supply will also have an impact on carbon emissions. So the energy savings, those 110 terawatt hours, would represent maybe 30 megatons of carbon at the moment that could be avoided by more efficient equipment. Not only is the electricity consumption an issue, just in terms of having to deliver the capacity, the generating capacity, and deliver that, also it's the peak time as well. So at the moment, 10% of the electricity peak is probably going to cooling. By 2040, that could be as high as 30%. And this is problematic because you're only needing generating capacity for a small part of the day when it's at its hottest. So we've got excess capacity really at that time. If you improve the efficiency, that peak could be reduced to, say, 15%. So it's not only the electricity savings, but it's also the peak as well that's needed. Okay, if you go to the next slide. The good news is that more efficient equipment needn't cost much more. So what we've got here is a data set from a survey by our colleagues at CLASP. So it's actually a really nice data set. What showing on the left-hand side is efficiency on the x-axis. So going from a cooling seasonal performance factor of say 3 up to about 7. And on the y-axis going upwards, we've got the purchase price of the equipment. And what you see is that as the equipment gets more efficient, it does cost a little bit more. However, you could go from a seasonal efficiency of say 3 up to 5, even 6 without it costing much more. So a consumer with the right knowledge could purchase a more efficient equipment without having to pay a lot more for the appliance. If you look on the right-hand side, what this one's showing on the y-axis is not just the purchase price, but also the running price coupled with the purchase price. So it's the lifetime cost of the appliance. And what you see over the, say, 10 years of the piece of equipment is that consumers, if they purchase a more efficient one, will end up paying less money over the lifetime of the equipment. So it's in their financial interest to buy something that's even at the moment, say a 5 or 6 cooling season performance factor. So the good news is products are on the market to more than double the efficiency of the products, and they needn't cost that much more at the moment to purchase those products. If you go to the next slide. So what's going to help drive that improvement in efficiency? So there's several bits of things that policymakers can do, and usually classified in 3 main regions. One is regulation, one is information, and one is incentives. So in terms of regulation, to really move the bottom end of the market, minimum energy performance standards are one of the key regulations that governments can use. And the ASEAN region's got a very good history of coordinating that action, and actually now have a requirement to have a seasonal factor of 3. So ASEAN's already on the way towards doing that. Building codes, which is in the other breakout sessions, another important area. Importantly, information can help, so consumers can better understand and say what's on the market through, say, labeling or product registration systems. They can purchase more efficient equipment. However, what's also interesting, what we'll hear a little bit more about today, is what's on the incentives side, what can pull the market up. And this can include things like rebates or loans to help consumers purchase more efficient equipment. But it can also be other things which you saw in the strategy presented earlier. So it could be things like on-bill financing, maybe energy service companies can have a role to play as well. And we'll come back to that later in this session today. So next slide. I just want to finish this as my last slide. This is something we're working with the Super Efficient Appliance Deployment Initiative, and it's something called a ladder framework. And this is setting out what policy should look like for the next, say, 10 years. So we're focused here on 2 of the main policy regulations. So we have MEPS in 2020 and the energy labels, 1-star to 5-star, with efficiency on the left-hand side. However, by using these performance tiers or our ladder, you can set future levels into the future. So having a roadmap to say where MEPS could be, or maybe where the energy label thresholds could be, is a good way to provide certainty to the market. And these thresholds can also be used for other performance, other policies in this space. So this particular roadmap is something that will be developing for multiple countries, and we'd like to explore further with the ASEAN group as well to see what can we do up to the year 2030. And final slide. Good, next slide. So I'd just like to summarize by saying in the ASEAN region, electricity consumption is rising very quickly at the moment, and we expect an even further dramatic rise by 2040, and that's going to have a very significant impact on the grid. However, the good news is cost-effective opportunities do exist to improve the efficiency of air conditioning equipment. However, that's only going to really be delivered if we have very good policies to drive a lot of that. A lot of that will come from minimum energy performance standards and labeling, as well as a pathway to signpost where industry should be going. And also new business models might be useful as well in this context. And ultimately, looking at these pathways is what we're going to be doing in our roadmap project. So we certainly welcome your feedback and your input into this project. So with that, I'll hand back to you, Michael.
Thank you very much, Kevin. And thank you for the wonderful overview there of cooling demand and forecasts in the ASEAN region, and also some of the different policy measures that can be put in place. And that's a wonderful introduction now into our next panel session. I'm not sure if my colleague Tio is able to take control of the PowerPoint presentations again and share the first Menti poll results. But if not, then perhaps we'll skip the next Menti poll question and move straight on to our panel discussion in the interest of time. So I'm very pleased now to introduce the first panel for our session, and we have a wonderful panel of speakers today. We have Alvin Jose, Principal Energy Specialist from Sustainable Energy for All. We have Wisarut Metasit, an engineer from the Department of Alternative Energy Development and Efficiency in the Ministry of Energy, Thailand. We have Catherine Hassan, Associate Southeast Asia from CLASP. And last but not least, Bingtang Mudana from the ASEAN Center for Energy. So we have a terrific lineup. And I'd now like to call on Alvin Jose to deliver your intervention. Thanks, Alvin. Over to you for now, Alvin. Thank you.
Okay, thanks a lot. Good morning from Vienna. It's a pleasure for me and SE for all to be in this very important workshop, and many thanks to IEA and ACE for having us on for having such a workshop and having some interesting discussions. I think from my side, what I'll try to do is to just set up a scene in terms of what should a sustainable cooling framework look like in ASEAN, and what are the main elements, at least for us to consider. Next slide, please. So we all know the importance of cooling when it comes to the Sustainable Development Goals, at least in the context of SDG 7. Of course, with the background set by Kevin, we saw how it will be an important sector when it comes to the energy consumption, carbon emissions. But it has a lot of other linkages as well. Cooling is more and more becoming an integral part of our lifestyle. And maybe 10, 15 years ago, it was considered luxury, but not anymore. Now you can see that when it comes to cooling, it does provide an improved development outcomes in the developing world, especially when it comes to reduction of food wastes. When you look at the access to health, cooling plays a big part of things. Cooling plays a big part in terms of productivity. We have seen that where there is a lack of cooling access, there is a reduction in productivity. This can directly impact maybe students in schools, universities that do not have access to cooling. It can also impact those workers who are in the daily workforce. They might be having impact or loss of productivity. So this actually shows that cooling has a lot of challenges when it comes to how it interplays with our lifestyles. Also, if you look at how now our cities are evolving, at least in the global south, cooling is also becoming a big part of the energy chain, but also in terms of how it plays with other aspects in terms of more gender opportunities, in terms of how women can participate in the daily workforce, and also in terms of how it works in terms of the overall different spheres of people that we look into. So next slide, please. And with that, I can basically comment to is that last year we had released the Chilling Prospects 2020 report. which basically tracks the issues in terms of access to cooling to the various kind of populations around the world. I have taken this data for Southeast Asia, and it basically shows the data for 2020. It is more specifically with the reference of 2018 data, because what we try to do is look at the income data and also the electricity access data, and look at the kind of population that have challenges in terms of access to cooling. So you can see over here in terms of the rural poor in Southeast Asia, just a caveat that for the Southeast Asia countries, we do not have the data for Brunei, Malaysia, and Singapore, but all the other 7 ASEAN member states. So for ASEAN countries, in terms of rural poor, we saw in 2020 a reduction in the rural poor by 5.28 million. This was due to the major improvements in terms of the poverty line, and also the electricity access in Indonesia, Myanmar, and Philippines. By rural poor, what we mean is that most of the population are basically subsistence farmers, and they may not have an access to a cold chain that allows them to sell their produce. And also they might have risks in terms of health because of lack of medical access, and especially in terms of the cold chain and vaccination. So that is the one part of the rural poor. But when we now shift this story towards the urban poor, these are basically populations that can afford a minimal amount of electricity. They can maybe afford a refrigerator and fan, but they may not have access to electricity, or they may have access to intermittent supplies of electricity, and they may not have enough access in terms of the refrigeration usage. So they might be basically they may not be able to keep food for a long time. So in terms of this population, what we saw was that there was an increase in about 1 million people in urban poor in Southeast Asia, and this was due to largely by the increase in Philippines, followed by Indonesia, Laos, and Myanmar. And next slide, please. The next set of group that we saw are the lower middle income, and by lower middle income we mean that typically these populations are seen in cities or urban areas. Their incomes are around less than $10 a day, and they have reasonable access to electricity, but they do not have the purchasing power of buying an efficient cooling appliance. And as we saw earlier from Kevin's presentation, we see that a lot of these, this is an important population, at least for Southeast Asia, because what we call them are the carbon captive population. So what they tend to do is that they, because of the kind of purchasing power they have, they tend to buy cheaper ACs, refrigerators, fans, but most of the times these kind of appliances tends to be inefficient and more carbon emitting. So with this, we saw that there was in 2020 an increase of this by 8 million. And this, except for Thailand, all the countries we saw an increase in the rise of lower middle income group. The largest was seen in Indonesia, Myanmar, and Philippines. And I guess one of the main challenges for us would be in developing an ASEAN roadmap, sustainable cooling roadmap, is to how to provide energy efficient cooling appliances or solutions at a cheaper price. I think that would be the bigger challenge ahead for all of us. And finally would be the middle income group. We saw the middle income group are typically groups that have a daily income of between $10 to $20 a day and have very good access to electricity. And we saw that there was a drop in this in 2020 by around 40 million. This was largely due to decreases in Indonesia, Philippines, and Thailand, but there was a large increase in Vietnam as well. And we typically see that this could be also because some, maybe due to the COVID-19, some might fall back into the lower middle income, and also some might be going away from the middle income to an upper middle income level. But of course, we have to see this data. Hopefully, we'll be able to release new insights in the upcoming Chilling Prospects 2021 report. Next slide, please. So finally, I think this is my final slide. And in terms of a framework, I think it is very important to look at cooling from a holistic picture. We all tend to look at cooling generally from an end-use perspective, but I think what would be important for ASEAN and ASEAN member states to look into is how to look at cooling from a more from a holistic framework and ensure that we are capturing all the major elements, or at least all the sectors from where cooling demand rises. So for this, SE4All has developed sustainable cooling needs assessment framework and also a solutions framework. So we think that the major three areas and from which cooling needs arises is basically for thermal comfort, for food and nutrition, basically for cold chain, and for healthcare, as you all can see now how the presence of cold chain is becoming more and more important for vaccination efforts for COVID-19. Next slide, please. Next, yeah. So to do this, we need to optimize by 5 main elements or solutions approach. One is we call protect, basically to provide solutions that are that protect vulnerable peoples, businesses, and countries. To reduce is basically to get into policies that look into reduction of cooling demand, active cooling demand, that is through solutions such as passive cooling solutions or better urban planning. Then towards shift, where we essentially look into shifting of traditional fossil fuel-based powered cooling solutions to renewable, or even shifting from high global warming refrigerants to low global warming or natural refrigerants as well. And to improve, and this is where Kevin's presentation was mostly focused on, was to improve the energy efficiency of the cooling solutions out there, and to leverage, of course, the various kind of innovative models and mechanisms that can make all of this financially feasible for large sections of societies. Next slide, please. And then finally, all of them would be bucketed into the 4 major areas of solutions, which is technology, services, policy, and financial. In terms of technology, of course, we have active solutions, which we mostly tend to focus on, but I think it is very important to also look into the passive solutions as well, because if you look at the urban poor or even rural poor people, a lot of them would be mostly can afford only such solutions. And in terms of cooling, for active cooling solutions as well, it is very important to also look into energy efficiency of fans, because for a lot of people, that is the first tier solution that they tend to access. Next would be services. In terms of services, I think it would be important to look into how the buildings are operated and then they're maintained, and also in terms of how these appliances are also operated and maintained. Another big part of services would be also how the refrigerants are being used, and in terms of how they can be ensured that the leaks are reduced. As well, there's a big part of these services where skill development and upgradation and a lot of investment in terms of human capital has to be also be done. In terms of policies, there's a wide range of policies which Kevin already mentioned. I won't go through it. But one thing certainly would be is that in this policy framework, what will be very important is to have an overall coordination framework, because sustainable cooling solutions delivery is not only or its success of it is not only dependent upon the energy ministries. It would be also important to have the buy-in of other relevant government stakeholders, for such as housing ministries, the local urban development planners. So all of these different policy developers and implementing agencies have to actually come together, and that coordination framework has to be set up at national levels for it to be successful. And of course, nothing can be done without the finance to deliver them. I think this would be a very key area, and we have to all come together to find a way to deliver more efficient, more climate-friendly solutions at a more affordable manner, because we can see that the shift from rural poor to urban poor is happening, and a lot of rural population is now more and more, we are seeing more and more coming into the cities. And what kind of solutions they actually adopt now would basically set up a stock for the future. So we have to make sure that whatever they access at this point is energy efficient and is affordable. So with that, I'll stop my intervention, and I'll hand it over back to you, Michael. Thanks.
Sorry, I swear I clicked that mute button before I started talking. Thanks, Alvin, for that presentation. I think it's a really great introduction to the panel, and really excellent to see the socioeconomic issues and the human issues right at the front and center of the space cooling challenges for Southeast Asia. I note we're running a bit behind schedule, and apologies, some of those are because of technical issues we had earlier today. So I might save my question until the end of the panel and the question I'm going to pose to everybody, because I think it would fit in nicely there to have you be able to wrap that up then instead. Tio, I'm not sure if it's easy for you to quickly throw to the first Menti poll results at this stage, and then we'll pass on to our next speaker after. Thank you. Thank you so much. So we can see here that we have a wide range of places people are dialing in from today, and a good range of people from across the Asean region who have joined us. So thanks so much, and it's great to have such a diverse group dialing in today. Thank you. We'll push on now to our next speaker. So I'm very happy to be able to introduce Mr. Wisarut Metasit from the Department of Alternative Energy Development and Efficiency in Thailand to take the floor for a short intervention. So thank you very much, Wisarut. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Michael. It's my honor to be invited to the workshop today. For my part, I would like to give a quick summary of some of the policies and works that are being done in Thailand currently. Next slide, please. So the first one shown in the top left is our Building Energy Code, or BEC, which has been recently approved by the cabinet. According to the code, new or retrofitted buildings of specific types with a total area larger than 2,000 square meters must comply with the Building Energy Codes. Since the law has just recently come into effect, we will be enforcing the code for buildings larger than 10,000 square meters, and then get progressively more strict down to 2,000 square meters over the next 3 years. The code itself includes many criteria, one of them being the air conditioning system. So it depends on the size and type of air conditioner. So for example, it could be air cool or water cool. They will have different requirements. As you can see from the presentation, it depends. It could be the COP larger than 3.22, or for the larger one, it could be 1.33 to 0.5 kilowatt per ton refrigeration, depending on the types. The second one, shown in the bottom left, is our standard and labeling programs and related incentives. In Thailand, we have HEPs and MEPs with the EER and SEER values as shown in the presentation, again, depending on the size and types of the air conditioning system. This helps prevent low efficiency air conditioners from being produced or imported into the country, as well as exemplify the high efficiency air conditioners being sold in Thailand. Also, various incentives are provided for high efficiency air conditioners. So it ranges from financial incentives in the form of subsidies, soft loan programs, or it can also have non-financial incentive, such as being placed in the innovation list, which will receive further recognition, as well as having certain benefits in the government procurement process. The third program, which is in the bottom right, is a program called the Ragnama, which is a collaborative project between GIZ of Germany, Electricity Generating Authority of Thailand, or EGAT, as well as my department, the EDE of the Ministry of Energy. This program is financed by the NAMA Facility Fund. So under this program, we expedite the market entry of energy efficient air conditioners by using the environment-friendly refrigerant, the R22. And how the program works is that it supports multiple key factors. The supports include financial incentive schemes in the form of soft loan and subsidies for the production line modification, along with the financing capacity building programs, as well as the testing facilities, as well as the marketing schemes, which will help accelerate the entry of the new air conditioners into the market. And then last but not least, in the top right corner, we have regional collaboration on air conditioner standards and market verification and enforcement. This is one of the works under the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Subsector Network, which is a group responsible for energy efficiency collaboration between ASEAN member countries. So Thailand, as the chair of the network, has been doing various works with the help of various international organizations and dialogue partners, which also include IEA as well, to improve regional energy efficiency. Some of the works related to air conditioning systems, including harmonization of standards, testing methods, a regional database for high efficiency air conditioners, as well as the mutual recognition agreement of testing results, which will help the spread of air conditioning technologies to go a little bit faster. So the 4 policies I have mentioned today are some of the air conditioning related policies I would like to share today. So thank you very much for your attention, and back to you, Michael.
Thanks so much, Wizard. And I think that's a really great overview of the range of policy tools required to have effective cooling policy, that it can't just come down to one particular element, but it's a really great presentation and overview of how building energy codes, standards and labeling programs and information programs combined with incentives and regional cooperation have supported the advancement of sustainable cooling in Thailand. So thank you so much for that intervention. I'd like to introduce Catherine Hassan, an associate from Southeast Asia for CLASP, to make your intervention. And very excited to have you here today. Apologies for the rush. We're trying to make up a little bit of time, but I'll have a question to put to the panel after all of your interventions. So thank you very much. Without further ado, the floor is yours, Catherine. Thank you.
Thanks, Michael. So I would just first like to say thanks to IEA for facilitating and for organizing this event. So it will be interesting to share information and share experiences from our past activities. Well, CLASP is an organization that's focused on supporting policy implementation, specifically in standards and labeling for appliances and equipment. And I would just like to introduce myself quickly. My name is Catherine Hassan, And I work primarily in Southeast Asia and actually primarily Indonesia. So I have colleagues who are also conducting activities in the region. And just to begin, I guess Alvin Jose and Kevin Lane and also previously Mr. Wisaruth has really well provided a good background on why space cooling is so important for the ASEAN countries. It's a special region, especially also for our organization. We consider it a focus region that we really want to support or provide contribution in. We know that electricity consumption has been growing tremendously, as Kevin shown earlier. And I have, so just diving right into it, I have a map shown here of the region. We know that when we think about space cooling, two equipments come into mind for the region, where we have constant need for providing thermal comfort. So air conditioners and also electric fans, so electric comfort fans. Air conditioners, we do know this is a group or a product group that contributes to a significant increase in peak demand and also growth in electricity consumption over the decades. And also, so of course, we have seen that countries in ASEAN are mobilized to adopt standards and labeling policy for ACs. As we can see here in the frost blue, these countries are already implementing standards and labeling programs or policies for ACs. And in gray, countries that are moving towards it, in the process of developing policies. And we do know that, we all know that there is a regional effort for ASEAN harmonization under the ASEAN Shine framework. And so we really think that we're supportive of the effort and would like to continue to contribute towards that over the next years. And just a quick glance here for funds, even though it is a more common appliance that's commonly found in ASEAN households, only limited number of countries have already adopted labeling policy for comfort fans. And we are actually hoping that maybe in Indonesia it will be developed soon, and actually Philippines as well. And so just moving on to the next slide quickly. I just have this overview of our presence in Southeast Asia. So we have been very fortunate to have been trusted to work with policymakers, supporting the process in the policy implementation, policy development, and capacity building in a variety of activities. So as listed here, we are present in a number of these countries: Cambodia, Laos, Vietnam, the Philippines, Indonesia, Thailand, and as well as we work on regional activities under funds available from KSEP and also from Asia Edge initiative. And so we are happy to share our experience and our findings from our past and ongoing activities on these two main products. I guess this is that's all from me, Mike. Very brief. Thanks so much.
Thanks so much, Catherine. And it's really fantastic to get that overview of cooling policy development for those two important technologies, ACs and air conditioners and fans, that are the core focus of the cooling roadmap, especially because we do have the sister roadmap under development for buildings and construction that covers those other important elements around building fabric. Thank you. And again, national and regional compliance and a lot of that work around cooperation is a crucial piece of the puzzle. So again, I might come back with a question at the end of the panelists' interventions. but this is probably quite a good segue to our next speaker, Mr. Bintang Widana from the ASEAN Center for Energy. So I'd like to invite you now to take the floor and a short intervention. And again, unfortunately, we're running a bit behind today, but if you're able to keep it within 5 minutes, then we should be able to be back on track. So the second panel isn't cut short. So thank you so much. And the floor is yours, Bintang.
Okay, thank you, Michael. Okay, so good day, everyone. My name is Bintang from the ASEAN Center for Energy. Thank you very much to IEA for this wonderful opportunity. I would like to share about our current ongoing program, that is the promotion of higher efficiency air conditioner in ASEAN through harmonization of standard and also through the strengthening market verification of enforcement capability. Next slide, please. So this project is done with ACE as the PMO, and we are supported by the IIEC and the U4E, and also supported by the Japan Asian Corporation Integrated Fund. Next slide, please. Okay. In this project, there are two phases, and currently we are in the phase 1, about 3 work packages. That is the harmonization toward common evaluation method, support national and regional policy development, and also the capacity building for the testing laboratory. Next slide, please. Currently, we are already finishing the regional development. That is, we are already having a technical working group and the policy working group for this harmonization of the air conditioner. And we are moving on to the recommendation to our subsector network in the ASEAN, that is the EENC, Energy Efficiency and Conservation Subsector Network. And so after that, we will have a national chapter for the ASEAN member state to all of the 10 countries. And also we will have in the work package 3 a round robin testing of the air conditioner in the ASEAN. It is 5 countries in ASEAN. Next slide, please. So this is the update of how the current policy and condition in the ASEAN. As you can see, that most of ASEAN member countries have already adopted or in the process of approving both ISO 5151 and ISO 16358. In the exception of the Singapore, that is because they already have a similar to the CSPF, that is the weighted COP or weighted EER. The metric itself mostly also use the CSPF. And from our technical working group, we are also having a consensus on using a temperature bins hour that reflect the usage pattern of ASEAN countries. So there will be a regional temperature bin and also a national temperature bin that is convertible. And also, as we can see here, the ASEAN member countries also have a maps and labeling program in ASEAN, and we are currently helping them to develop it. We also have a regional maps at the CSPF. For CSPF, there is 3.07 for the AC cooling capacity below 3.7. Next slide, please. This is a key point that we have from the regional workshop that has been done. First of all, that we have completed a harmonization of testing method, that is the ISO 5151, with the waiting for the adoption, fully adopted into the national policy from Myanmar, and then the harmonization evaluation method that is using the EER and CSPF, and mostly we will shift to the CSPF for the inverter and also to the fixed speed. And then, as I said before, the harmonization of maps in the regional area, that is for the EER is 2.9 and the CSPF is 3.08. A mistake here by this year, and also we are planning to increase it a little bit, and we will give recommendation to this subsector network. Lastly, about the testing infrastructure, we will conduct a round robin testing for the national lab in each country in ASEAN. Next slide, please. That is all that I can give a presentation today. Back to you.
Thank you so much, Bintang, and I appreciate that presentation, and it's great to see all of the work that the ASEAN Center for Energy is undertaking relating to space cooling in the region. So I now, in a moment, I'll call all the panelists to turn your cameras back on and pass on a question. But perhaps first, my colleague Tio could put up another Mentipoll question, which hopefully can go a little more smoothly than some of the hiccups we've had today. So note there may be a new code now on screen. And I'll just type that quickly in the chat for people. So the code is 85979283. And the question we have here is to get some of you, the audience, and your opinions on what you think some of the most important policies are for sustainable cooling. So we have choices of minimum energy performance standards and energy labeling, monitoring, verification and enforcement or compliance type of activities, incentive programs through measures such as grants, tax rebates, public procurement and loans, or innovation, research and development. So you can go to the Mentipoll there and rank from what you think are the most to the least important policies. And I'm not sure if we're already seeing some results coming in that we'd want to see now, Tio, or we could return to them after the question. So we'll just have a look quickly now. And we can see that at the moment we have we had incentive programs in the lead there, but you can see that as the votes are coming in, this is changing, and monitoring, verification and enforcement is seen as one of the most important measures there for a moment, which of course is so essential to make sure that the policies and standards that are set actually deliver the results that they intend in reality. But we can see that minimum energy performance standards are also increasing there. And of course, it's challenging in a simple ranking tool like this to express exactly where they sit on par, and it's not going to be the way in which decision makers will make a choice on where to put efforts. But it is interesting to see the importance that the audience puts today on incentive programs and the need for some of those cash and financial incentives to drive sustainable cooling. So thanks so much for your participation, and we will be collecting these results as well. And we might just go back quickly to the PowerPoint presentation. But the question I have for each of the panelists, with hopefully just a short response of up to a minute each, is the question of what you think is the most successful space cooling, or what you think are the most successful space cooling policies in ASEAN at present, and what you see as the main opportunities for improvement in space cooling in the future. So I might just throw to Alvin first, if that's okay, and happy to repeat the question if you need. So I'll just do that one more time for all of the speakers and also the audience, which is what do you think are the most successful space cooling policies in ASEAN at present? And what do you think are the main opportunities for improvement in the future? So thank you, Alvin.
Yeah, sure, Michael. I think certainly in terms of space cooling in ASEAN, well, first what comes to my mind is certainly the MAPS program, which has been taken. Of course, in many countries it is in different phases, and I commend the effort done by ACE to harmonize this and bring everyone. This is a very difficult work. I totally understand that. And so it's and how that if ASEAN is able to achieve this faster, I think there is really a big success story behind this because of the economies of scale that is pretty much around it. ASEAN is also a center in terms of technology solutions provider as well. And I think there's a lot of potential in terms of how the space of how a harmonized maps, the regional technology development provider, and especially in terms of how the ACs are produced and sold in, globally, and also how the economies of scales can be leveraged. I think these are the three main areas. If ASEAN is able to dial it in properly, this can be a big success story. And I'm very happy to see that a lot is happening on this side.
Thank you very much, Alvin. So I might throw next to Catherine to get your thoughts on what you think have been the most successful policies to date and what you think the big opportunities are for the future.
Yeah, I guess I would like to second Alvin's comment on the ASEAN harmonization effort. It will definitely be a game changer when all countries can really implement and can really establish an aggressive roadmap that will really strengthen the whole region, and that will make sure that we can prevent influx of inefficient technologies to the region. And you can also share resources because not all countries have the same level of available resources and testing capabilities, right? And so I think that would be upcoming. But I would also add that we are currently collaborating with Thailand with EGAT. Actually, there is a program. Maybe Mr. Wisaru can add some more comments on this as well. But our colleagues really think that this is an inclusion of digital information and labeling. So giving consumers access to the labeling information, even pre and post purchase, it would be really valuable in the process. That would really give consumers power to make the decisions that they have to make. These appliances last for a long period of time. ACs can last up to 15 years. And so, yeah, this would really be transformative, giving the power back to consumers to make the right decisions for their benefits, of course.
Terrific, thank you so much. And now I'd like to open up for Bintang to provide a short response. Thank you.
Okay, so for the project, I think it is about the harmonization for the testing method, evaluation method, and also the maps, starting from the ASEAN Shines first until now being handled by ACE, is the most success story of the space cooling policies roadmap in the ASEAN. However, from your response in the Menti, I have to agree that the opportunity for the next step is also about the market verification and enforcement, because in ASEAN itself, we have a lot of local manufacturer in ASEAN, and we have to, increase their capacity for their production so we can fulfill our own market in the ASEAN. And also for the consumer, the user, we have to have them realize the importance of using the energy efficient air conditioning and other appliances for the sake of the effort we have made in the ASEAN and also in the whole world. So I think that's my response.
Thank you very much, Bintang. So last but not least, I would like to throw the question over to Wizard to see what you think the most successful policies have been for space cooling in ASEAN to date, and what you think some of the opportunities are for the future. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. So I guess all four of us have the same line of thought. So in my opinion, the equipment harmonization is going to be like the most successful, or at least the one with the most potential, especially considering such a large gap between the existing maps in the ASEAN region and the best available technologies. But I would like to add that not just the standard harmonization will be needed, but also the accompanying harmonization. So for example, the harmonization of the testing methods, the harmonization of evaluation, as well as the enforcement of each country would play a major role for the harmonization of the standard to actually works and be successful. I think that's what I would like to add. Thank you, Michael.
Thank you so much, and thank you to all of our panelists. And I think it's great to have a range of different perspectives, but all converging on some of the big opportunities there to improve space cooling in the region. So looking very much forward to those opportunities playing out over the coming years. So I suppose now, in the interest of time and pushing on, I'd like to make sure we have enough time available for our next panel. So I'd like to thank all of our panelists for your presentations today, and also for your in-depth responses to the challenges and the questions that need to be answered to drive improvements in sustainable space cooling in the years ahead. So big thanks again to all of you. And if we can move on to the next slide, I would now like to hand over the floor to my colleague from the ASEAN Center for Energy, Dr. Zulfikar Yunaidi, Senior Officer at ACE, who will be moderating the second session. So over to you, Dr. Zulfikar. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mike, and good afternoon and good morning, ladies and gentlemen. So we are now in the second session for this breakout session in cooling. So in the second session, we're going to discuss more about the business models and of course the financing for the sustainable cooling. So in the first session, we have discussed more about the policy side, and we also learned from the Menti poll that was provided earlier that the issue of incentive is very important. And related to that, I do believe that the availability of financing and innovative business models, it's very important, so that this sustainable cooling can really penetrate into the market. So this, again, this business model needs to be further developed and experimented and created some success cases so that the people, both the government, private sectors, can see how they can stimulate both the supply and demand for the sustainable and energy efficient cooling products. So for today's session, we have four great speakers here. We have Jim from the Sustainable Development Capital. We have Han Lee, which is the Vietnam country representative from Global Green Growth Institute, or GGGI. We also have Zeki, the analyst from Climate Policy Initiative, or CPI Indonesia. And last but not the least, we also have Dimitris, which is the Senior Energy Efficiency Business Developer Specialist from Basel. And I think without further ado, we will just start with the first presentations. So I would like to call Jim to turn on his camera, and probably to Theo to move on to Jim's presentation slides. Yes, so Jim, the screen is yours.
Hi, good morning, good afternoon to everybody, and thank you for the opportunity to talk a little bit about efficient buildings and cooling in Southeast Asia and business models. Next slide, please. Next slide, please. So by way of introduction, my name is Jim McGuire. I'm a partner at Sustainable Development Capital, LLP, SDCL. We are not an NGO, we're not an advocacy group, we are a private equity firm headquartered out of London. I'm not going to walk you through all the bullet points, but I think what I'd like to emphasize is that we manage about $1.5 billion, US 1.5 billion of public and private capital around the world. But that third bullet point is a topic which I want to come back to in my last slide. We manage 4 private funds: UK, Ireland, Singapore, and the United States. And I think one of the points that is fundamental, and a number of the speakers have mentioned it, is this the need for public and private to come together. We are a private capital provider, but what the last 2 years as a recipient under the Kigali Cooling Efficiency Program, working in Asia and Africa, has illustrated for us is fundamentally without the engagement of the public sector. And when I say public, I refer to national governments, as well as multilateral lenders or export credit agencies. Without the involvement of those stakeholders, the path to the roadmap for cooling efficiency in Asia will be a much more challenging roadmap. And I want to just then also just add one point on this slide. We are a global player. The bulk of our investments are Europe, the UK, and North America. In those parts of the world, it's more about heat, it's more about energy as a service. In this part of the world, what we are looking at within the construct of the Kigali Cooling Efficiency is cooling as a service. And when we look at this roadmap and the business models, one of the big issues that, and it's important to sort of just to look back to the prior session here, one of the big issues will be capacity building education. And certainly a lesson learned for us over the last 18 months, 24 months has been this idea of cooling as a service, of selling, cooling efficiency, has taken a lot longer to inculcate across the region. And the bulk of our activity right now is Southeast Asia. Then we certainly think is appropriate. And as we move forward on how to build out, how to accelerate at scale cooling efficiency across Southeast Asia, that education part of the equation will be fundamentally important. The next slide, please. So I want to just really kind of highlight quickly some of the points I've just made. What we're looking at is how to move cooling efficiency more into the mainstream in the built environment particularly. My background is from the insurance industry, and the key issue that we looked at increasingly in that industry is the issue of extreme weather. What we're trying to do is to mobilize up to $100 million in private or public capital to address cooling and energy efficiency in Asia. Our activity just highlighted there in that second box, we've developed over the last 24 months about a pipeline of about 540 projects, 58 counterparties, a little over an aggregate pipeline of 407 million, and then weighted primarily for COVID back to just below 100 million. And I just want to address that point about the counterparties versus the projects. And it was just mentioned in the prior session. One of the fundamentally important aspects of delivering cooling efficiency of the region will be that issue of scale. And so how do we develop different distribution models or distribution strategies to accelerate the development of cooling efficiency projects across the region? So when we look at our major segments of hospitality, manufacturing, healthcare, and the built environment real estate, what we're really focused on is how not to do one project at a time, but how to work in partnership with companies that have or represent an enormous distribution opportunity. We're working with the IEA, IFC, OECD, again, in a lot of different multilateral settings and across the Southeast Asia region. So what I would then highlight, what we were focused on initially was purely the issue of cooling efficiency. And for example, we were looking at trying to develop scale in the hospitality sector. COVID-19's impact and the erosion of asset credit quality, so the counterparty creditworthiness for us to finance again, has meant that we've had to sort of recalibrate. And what we've really now moved towards is the manufacturing and real estate sectors, even more than originally planned. But also importantly, what we've seen is the need to pivot towards a strategy which combines cooling and energy efficiency with distributed generation and distributed solar principally. And the important thing to highlight there is that within the region in Asia, what we are still seeing is that the energy and cooling and energy efficiency is nascent. It's just at its infancy. And within the region, this issue of solar is still a lot more topical. It's more tangible to asset owners. And that's something that we've got to look at is how can we educate the asset owners that getting into energy efficiency, improving, optimizing energy utilization is equally, if not more important than simply that distributed generation. But it's hard to see a chiller, and it was highlighted in that Menti poll, it's hard to see a chiller, but it's pretty easy to see panels on a roof or next to an asset. And so what I'd like to do then is just move to the next slide and just kind of highlight two case studies that I've put in here. When we talk about these roadmaps, and so roadmap number one I put there is insurance in the cooling and energy efficiency space. The fact of the matter is throughout the discussion already today, excuse me, you've heard a lot about different areas of the economy. But when we talk about cooling and energy efficiency, we're talking about the built environment, right? And what we need to do is make sure that the insurance industry is more actively involved in this discussion, because to date, they have not been as involved. And it's not for lack of initiative, because some of the early work that was done drawing a link between energy efficiency and improved safety or improved property loss control dates back to the late 90s. But where the insurance industry has not been as agile as financial services, as an example, is in drawing that link between an asset which goes through a cooling and energy efficiency retrofit, its improved loss control, and then that incentive, that discount. So where you see sustainable linked loans or green mortgages as very topical in the financial services sector today, what we're working to do is to partner with different insurance companies to try and drive a better understanding of the link between cooling and energy efficiency and a quality asset. And when we look around the region, we look at major metropolitan centers across Southeast Asia, Jakarta, Manila, and Kuala Lumpur, etc. We're looking at urbanized or increasingly urbanized areas, and we need to build fundamentally resilience into the assets, into that built environment in each of those major urban areas. So for us, one of our key aspects in terms of the model is distribution, and it's using the insurance industry as a distribution channel to deploy more cooling and energy efficiency projects. The next slide, please. What I highlighted here is roadmap number 2, and whereas roadmap number 1 is still in gestation, we're still developing that strategy. Roadmap number 2 is real. The data in front of you is real data from a series of investment grade audits that we funded under the Kigali Cooling Efficiency Program in Indonesia, in Bali. And I won't run through the numbers there, but essentially for each of the 3 projects that are cited in this little slide, we had fantastic returns. We had really positive savings, which we developed out of these investment grade audits. The energy efficiency projects made financial sense. So what happened was, as I mentioned, we had this issue of COVID-19's impact. So most of the hotels in this particular situation, 3 of them in Bali, at points in time had single-digit occupancy rates. So from a counterparty credit perspective, it was a real challenge for us to look at these as in the middle of COVID as a good investment. Secondly, we look at the global hospitality companies, and again, we're looking at, as I said, distribution. How does that roadmap get more accelerated? The roadmap works better when we can scale, when we can finance against 50 hotels, not just 1 hotel. And so one of the things that's important is that brand standard issue. And in the model of the hospitality industry today between the brands and the asset owners is something that needs to be looked at, because the brands make representations about greenhouse gas emission savings, and they want you to go stay at their hotel because they're a green hotel. But the entity that's actually that has to implement that, if it is brand standard, in fact, is going to be the asset owner. And what's clear to us in our work across Thailand, Malaysia, Indonesia, in terms of dealing with asset owners and global hospitality brands, is that there's a disconnect, right? And that's something which, again, when we look at what's needed in that roadmap, right? Third point I'd highlight was the issue, so 2 things which came out of our work was indoor air quality, which is fundamentally important, and the nexus between indoor air quality and energy efficiency, or cooling and energy efficiency, solid. COVID-19, interestingly, and perhaps counterintuitively, it took that discussion off the table because it became more about a virus than simply improving the air quality in that asset. Another thing I'd highlight is natural catastrophe risk. We look at hotels that are in and around resort areas and on the coast, etc. And one of the key things we saw was this issue of extreme weather and the importance of addressing extreme weather and resiliency within those hotels. But the last point I would like to come back to is the issue of what role do we see for national governments or for multilateral lenders? And what we really need is to go back to what I mentioned at the outset. We need to go back to a fundamental roadmap which has the public sector and the private sector deeply intertwined in trying to develop cooling and energy efficiency in Southeast Asia. without the engagement of an IFC or an ADB or other multilateral lenders, we will not accelerate and we will not go as quickly in terms of developing cooling and energy efficiency projects as is needed. There are investors. We are an investor. We are looking at building a portfolio of cooling and energy efficiency assets financed on a cooling as a service basis, when we will absolutely need the engagement of national entities and multilateral lenders to do that, because the erosion of credit quality caused by COVID-19 has been truly significant, particularly in certain areas such as hospitality. And those are, in conclusion, sort of the two quick roadmaps I wanted to highlight. One is what we're looking at is that distribution. Secondly, in the roadmap towards hospitality is what we really need is that engagement, that public-private partnership approach. Thank you very much, and I'll stop there.
Thank you very much, Jim, for the very interesting explanations on what you think about the potential innovative business model that can be applied in the Asia, especially in the Southeast Asia. Noted as well that with the experience from the financing institutions that your institutions hold and the experience you have in Europe and how in the Southeast Asia we need to further develop this cooling as a service, and especially the two roadmap or strategies that you mentioned. The first one is including the insurance industry, and the second in how to apply this cooling into the hospitality industry. Thank you very much for the insights. I will get back to you with questions in the end of the presentations, but for now I would like to invite Han Lee, which is the country representative of Vietnam in the GGGI. Which we are going to share with us about the sustainable cooling and innovative financing options in Vietnam. The screen is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Zulfikar, and good afternoon, good morning, and evening to those who dial in from different time zones. First of all, thank you very much to the organizer, the IEA and ACE, for inviting us to participate in this consultation workshop and sharing some of our experience as well as our viewpoints, and also for us to learn from a lot of the experienced panelists here. Without further ado, today I would like to speak a little bit about experience in Vietnam and some of the financing options that we are exploring. Next slide, please. But before we move on, for those who do not know about GGI, we are an intergovernmental organization headquartered based in Seoul, and seven countries in ASEAN are our members. A lot of them are founding members, including Indonesia and Vietnam. Next slide, please. And we're working with the government. So we're intergovernmental organization. We work a lot on investment and finance, but we're not an investor. And we basically work with the government to provide policy advice on how to remove barriers to investment, as well as working with the projects and also bundled projects to mobilize finance and address and provide feedback to the government on how to improve the investment environment. Next slide, please. We currently having 38 member countries, and as I mentioned before, 7 of ASEAN member countries we have strong presence in, including some of them are founding members: Thailand, Indonesia, Vietnam, and some new members: Laos, Cambodia, Myanmar, and Philippines also a founding member. Next slide, please. In Vietnam, we very much targets on greenhouse gas emission reduction, green jobs, air quality, and that lead to a lot of our activities, especially in the mitigation and energy efficiency, renewable energy sector, and that lead to our work in sustainable cooling. Next slide, please. So that is the slide that I wanted to show you, and it's very much resonates with what what our colleague Kevin mentioned earlier on, the demand, especially in Vietnam for cooling sector, will increase significantly. From 2016, there is a study done by GIZ. And if you can see in the graphic, is from 2016 to 2030, we're looking at the emission from cooling grow by 3 times. So there is a significant need to look at mitigation for the sector, and therefore the Vietnamese government has recognized the importance of sustainable cooling and incorporates this as an important mitigation measure in the updated NDC in September 2020. Next slide, please. So what is the financing barriers for sustainable cooling investments? And that is the purpose of this section, that we very much looking into why don't we see more sustainable cooling investments in Vietnam. The first that you often hear is low electricity tariffs, and hence there are low incentives. People or businesses do not have the incentives to upgrade or invest in more efficient technologies. I think Kevin in his presentation also mentioned Esco and Esco market. There's no real Esco market in Vietnam yet, and there's a number of reasons, and the 2 reasons that I would like to bring out here is the credit risk. That is, the Esco perceive the high credit risk of the customers, and the customers have high perceived performance risk for the Esco. Therefore, there is not so much of a market in Vietnam. Another barrier is lack of bankable projects, very limited pipeline in this space. There is no lack of finance per se in the market. However, when we talk to, like in our experience, we talk to the domestic commercial banks who receive credit line from, say, the World Bank and Green Climate Fund. The issue with the banks is that they cannot find quality bankable projects to invest. Next, lack of experience from the banks also. And because lack of projects, there's no real experience in this space, people tend to work with what we know, and it's much easier. And also, energy efficiency is not really an expertise of a banker. Therefore, energy efficiency projects often receive high risk premium from the bank. Next, please. And I think that is a very common barrier, that is very high upfront cost, high capex. Next, please. So what innovative business model? I mean, there are a lot of innovative business models around the world, and I think that is something that's been sort of touched upon in the different policy measures mentioned in Kevin's presentation as well, and some other panelists. How to introduce the Esco market and how to create market access and address the issue of scale, like what Jim, the previous panelist, was talking about. And Super Esco is one model that has been successful in a number of other countries. And we, GGI, is of the view that this could be a very valid business model for Vietnam to really break that Esco market. The role of a Super Esco is to address the market challenges through bulk procurement. It will look into bundled social infrastructure projects, for example, in schools, in hospitals, and also then look into further private sector market, for example, in hospitality, basically addressing some of the issues that Jim was mentioning before. Next, please. Accompanying this business model, there's a number of innovative financing instruments that we also would like to introduce to the Vietnamese market to accelerate the investments in sustainable cooling. And one of them is green bonds. And the Super Esco, given, like with such sort of large bundle of projects, they can also issue green bonds for these green assets. Now, green bond market in Vietnam is relatively new. There's a lot of appetite. However, there is no guidelines, no clear guidelines yet, and there's no ecosystem per se. So there's no verifiers, there's no third-party opinion, there's no there's one credit rating agency. So GGIAN Vietnam is working with Ministry of Finance to address this issue from policy of the financial market down to hand holding some of the issuers. And we did late last year, we did a market survey on the potential green bond market in Vietnam with the Vietnamese potential investors and issuers. And next click, please. And as you can see, with the survey, energy efficiency and green buildings are in the top sectors of interest for the issuer. And the next instruments that we would like to also introduce to Vietnam, which is also not really something new, but because some of the sustainable cooling investment is not yet commercially viable, especially if you look into more nature-based passive cooling measures that rely a lot on state budget. We would like to introduce a public financing mechanism through Vietnam Environment Protection Fund, which is administered by Ministry of Environment, to support some of the projects led by local governments. And actually, this is part of an activity, or actually an output that we working in partnership with UNEP and funded by KSEP. So these are some of the innovative instruments and models that GGIAN would like to introduce. Yeah, thank you very much. I stop there.
Thank you very much, Han. It's a very comprehensive presentation and very interesting as well. I do believe that the case that you displayed here, which is based on the Vietnam, can also be applied and scaled to other Southeast Asia countries as well. And I do noted that the solutions that you provided here, like the first one is the Super Esco. I do agree that the bulk procurement that can be done by the Super Esco can really solve the issue of really creating the proper environment, creating the trend of the sustainable cooling to the market. There is a case as well in India that came to our attention recently as well, that how they use the bulk procurement as well to reduce the price of LED bulb into 1/10 within 3 years, and now they're doing it the same for the air conditioner. And I also want to note on the green bonds and the national financing vehicle as well, which is probably a very good strategy again to provide the initial mover to the market so that the market can really implement and appreciate the sustainable cooling, and then make it into something sustainable when the market really accepts and develop this sustainable cooling market. Thank you very much, Han, for the presentations. I'll get back to you with more questions after the presentations. And I also would like to encourage the speakers to be active in the chat session. Also the other participants, sometimes they ask your question there. I would like to ask you to check that and provide your inputs whenever necessary, and just build a vibrant discussion in the chat while we are having this presentation moving forward. And for the next, we have Muhammad Zeki from the CPI Indonesia, which is gonna share similarly, but now it's about the viable EE business model in Indonesia. So without further ado, the screen is yours.
Thank you, Zulfikar. Good afternoon and good morning, everyone. Thank you, IEA and ACE, for hosting this workshop. My name is Zeki. I'm an analyst representing Climate Policy Indonesia, or CPI. CPI is an analysis and advisory organization with deep expertise in climate finance and policy. In Indonesia, we work closely with Ministry of Finance, Ministry of Energy, and financial institutions to support innovative financing instrument and scaling up finance for renewable energy and energy efficiency. And today I will briefly present CPI's latest study on energy efficiency in Indonesia. My presentation today will focus in Indonesia as presented by Kevin Lane, that IEA finds that Indonesia will lead the dramatic rise in cooling consumption in Southeast Asia with a projected of 150 million of AC unit installed in 2040 in Indonesia alone. And this is concerning as Indonesia have a quite high risk in lack of access to sustainable cooling. Next slide, please. So the first study from CPI is in collaboration with MASKEI, or the Indonesian Society of Energy Efficiency and Conservation. We surveyed last year facility managers and energy efficiency project developers in Indonesia on the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. From this survey, we found that half of the project developers feel that the new normal era has a positive impact because it stimulates innovation, but the other half feel that the impact is negative due to the uncertainty in the market. And the respondent also admit that the change in new normal of COVID-19 will likely to happen, and more importantly, that it will remain. And this will also bring new changes that can affect energy efficiency sector, such as the increased role of digital technology and IoT in energy efficiency, possible changes in energy efficiency business model and practices, and changes in energy efficiency for healthcare system. Next slide, please. And our second study is in collaboration with PT Sarana Multi Infrastruktur Indonesia, or PTSMI. PTSMI is a special mission vehicle under the Ministry of Finance, which is engaged in financing and preparing infrastructure project. Its latest mandate is including energy efficiency project in its eligible sectors. So our second study focuses on identifying the perceived risk for lenders and facility owners in running energy efficiency project in Indonesia. And under these premises, exploring the energy efficiency business, the viable energy efficiency business model in Indonesia. And again, we did a survey, and based on our intensive survey, we identified that the perceived financial risk mostly encountered by both Indonesian clients and lenders are cost increase, payment default, perceived high investment cost, prohibitive calculation of risk and return, and changing regulation on financial markets. So there are 5 big risks mostly encountered by Indonesian clients. Next slide, please. Also, this study analyzed the implementation of the 2 main energy efficiency business model used worldwide, which are the shared saving and guaranteed saving. However, we found that the generic implementation of both model has not been successful in answering the energy efficiency business barriers in Indonesia. And in Indonesia, a lot of adaptation and modification were required to improve the trust and level of comfort from both client and lenders. Next slide, please. So also in this study, we found several existing energy efficiency business model in Indonesia with slight adaptation to cater the need of facility owners and to remain economically feasible under the current existing policies and regulation in Indonesia. In this slide, we are giving 2 examples used by the local project developers, or Escos, which are service or device model and leasing and purchase model. These 2 models provide clients with options, and it brings a lot of a good level of confidence to the clients. There are other models such as quality energy service model, enhanced cooling as service model, which are all derivatives of from the shared saving and guaranteed saving model. we can see other different innovative business model or contractual agreements that are applicable in other countries. Next slide, please. And we also found that this improved business model can address the 5 big risks perceived by the project owners and banks, although some condition may apply, such as the size of project, the cash flow of the project owners, etc. But we found that this is a very good sign. It means that there are still room for project developers in Indonesia to wiggle through innovative business model alone, even with the high financial risk reputation of energy efficiency project in the country. And we feel that with the right financial and de-risking instrument, or with better or more supportive public finance and public policies on energy efficiency from the government, the energy efficiency market can definitely grow bigger. Next slide, please. And coming back to the result from our first study in the context of both COVID-19 economy recovery and also in the context of pushing more energy efficiency projects, there are public finance support that can be provided. And based on our survey, the reduction on bank loan interest for facility owners is considered the most needed one. Next slide, please. And in the context of long-term development of energy efficiency sector in Indonesia, the respondent gave their view on the policy support. And according to most project developers, the implementation of incentive or disincentive by the government, both fiscal and non-fiscal, will bring the most impact to more investment in energy efficiency sector. I think I will stop for now, and we can discuss more on this topic in the Q&A session. Thank you. Thank you, Zulfikar.
Yes, thank you very much, Zeki, for the concise and very interesting presentation, which is also well done, which is based on the study and the survey you've done in Indonesia. I really noted that how you try to adapt the shared saving and the guaranteed saving and try to propose the service or device as well as leasing and purchase business model, and to see like how the Indonesian government and stakeholders can really see these two innovative business model can really alleviate the barriers and the risk for energy efficiency investment in Indonesia. It is, we are really eager to see how we can really implement it, and maybe we can also use it as shared lessons for our sustainable cooling roadmap in ASEAN. So definitely we're gonna have more in-depth discussion with you later on. Thank you very much. And for the interest of time, I would like to call the next presentation, which is Dimitris Karamitsas, which is from the Basel Agency for Sustainable Energy, or BASE, which kind of shares about the servitization of cooling industry, or just like what mentioned by Jim in the beginning, is how to develop this cooling as a service. Dimitris, the screen is yours.
Thank you very much, Zulfikar. Hello, everyone, and thank you for the IEA and ACE for inviting me to this workshop to present Cooling as a Service. So I'm Dimitris, and I work for BASE, the organization behind the Cooling as a Service initiative. So before anything else, I'll briefly share a few words on the organization I work for. So you can jump on the next slide. So BASE, which stands for the Basel Agency for Sustainable Energy, is a non-for-profit foundation based in Switzerland, founded about 20 years ago by the Swiss government, and we are a special partner from the UN Environment Programme. So for the past 20 years, our expertise has really been on developing financial mechanisms and business models to accelerate investments into sustainable solutions to tackle climate change. So really, we work with a variety of players and act as a bridge between the public and the private sector. And some of our partners include, for instance, multilateral development banks, national banks, financial institutions, development agencies, and philanthropic organizations. So you can jump to the next slide. So before jumping into the core of the topic, let me take a step back and explain why we focus on the cooling industry. And I realize many of the people present on the call are aware of these figures, but we see that today cooling represents about 10% of worldwide energy consumption. and this is estimated to triple in the next 30 years. Now, this, of course, represents a huge investment opportunity of approximately 6.9 trillion US dollars over the next 30 years, but it is also a huge climate risk. So we see that businesses around the world engage with technologies which are on average 40 to 60% less energy efficient than the best systems available in their respective markets. Now, this is happening because of strong customer market barriers, also mentioned by James, Mishan, and Mohamed earlier as well, which we can summarize as first, the higher upfront cost of purchase. Second, customers usually have a lack of trust in the performance associated with these new technologies. Third, all of these businesses have their own investment priorities. And fourth, maintenance and spare parts of new technologies are typically seen as a business risk. So if we jump to the next slide. To tackle these challenges, at BASE, we saw really a strong opportunity to bring the model of servitization in the cooling industry, and hence started the Cooling as a Service initiative, which is a project in partnership with the Kigali Cooling Efficiency Program to mainstream the model in the markets. Back in 2019, we actually presented the model to the Global Innovation Lab for Climate Finance, which following a process of more than 100 and endorsed cooling as a service as one of the most innovative, actionable, and scalable climate financial instruments. So what is really cooling as a service, and James also mentioned this, it's a shift from selling an equipment to selling a service. And we see really that is a business that aligns the profits, the people, and the planet. And why is this? It's because as the equipment stays under the ownership of the solution provider, suddenly maximizing operating efficiency makes business sense for the provider, who can also lower its operating costs. It also enables a system thinking approach, which enables lower lifecycle costs for the provider, and it maximizes reutilization of the equipment and reuse of components through modular designs, which also therefore minimizes the risk of stranded assets. And it also encourages providers to keep innovating also for existing customers. All in all, Cooling as a Service is a model that incentivizes a design and selection of solutions based on long-term thinking, which also incentivizes a circular economy. Here, it's important to mention that we see the model really different as the energy savings contracts, whereby these are contracts that are signed with agreed upfront saving estimations, which very often may lead to frictions between the provider and the end user, and it doesn't really incentivize long-term performance gains. So if we jump to the next slide, this is a slide we typically like to show to investors because servitization is not new. Servitization has been applied to a variety of equipment industries, and it's really a growing trend. So an industry we like to compare cooling as a service with is solar PPAs, especially because as well, they go hand in hand, as does also heating as a service or lighting as a service and compressed air as a service, because they can be powered by solar panels in a similar business model. So if we jump to the next slide. So with CAS, what are the benefits for the key actors? And some of these benefits were underlined also in the previous conversations. For the end users, these are no capital expenditures upfront, enough balance service, a full transfer of performance risk, a full outsourcing of cooling services, and customers that can focus really onto their core business. For technology providers, they can increase the demand and deployment of most efficient technologies. They can benefit from predictable and continuous revenue streams, and they can bring additional value by selling outcome instead of selling equipment and spare parts. And importantly, for banks and investors, they have the opportunity to place green funding. They invest into assets which generate cash flows. They can engage with green projects, and they have really the opportunity to become the front runners to finance servitization models, which are really a growing new trend. So if we jump to the last slide. So at BASE, where have we been active on cooling as a service? We really acted on 4 pillars. First, which is very important, we decided to grow this Cooling as a Service Alliance, which today is actually more than 60 members, not 50. And this is combined also to what James was saying, the importance of growing capacity, growing awareness of this model across regions and industries. Secondly, we developed the standardized tools, which are the cooling as a service contracts, the pricing models, the financial structures, and also the documentation, which we saw very valuable for end customers to understand what is cooling as a service and what is the opportunity behind. And thirdly, we did that in combination with pilot projects across geographies and industries to really stress test the model and see if it does bring as much value to the different stakeholders across these different applications. And fourthly, we did a lot of work in raising awareness on the model. So initially we were doing matchmaking events, but eventually we had, of course, to shift to a lot more digital presence. So doing webinars, case studies, but also a global CAS e-summit, which was a whole day event on a virtual platform, which actually the content was recorded and still is available for people to go and educate and listen to investors, end users, and solution providers that have been implementing the model. So, and I cannot stress more what James was saying is as scale happens, which is really key for this model, it will also bring competition within the markets, which are really key also for making the offering more appealing for end users. So there you go. This closes my presentation, and many.
Yeah, thank you very much, Dimitris, for your presentations. And we really appreciate and are interested in this cooling as a service initiative from BASE. And we've quickly learned from your presentation on how this cooling as a service can basically change the paradigm of how people see this sustainable cooling, not only as equipment, but also as a service, which can provide a better economic environment for the sustainable cooling implementation in the future. And I also see that to really optimize this cooling as a service, we really need a lot of awareness raising, a lot of capacity building, how we can really put demos and pilots in the countries, in our case, especially in the Southeast Asia. And I think it's gonna be very interesting concept for us to work with our sustainable cooling roadmap in the region. Thank you very much. And we are going to move to the discussion session with whatever time we have left. But before that, I would like to request Theo to pull up the Menti poll so that the audiences can work on it while we have short discussions with our panelists. So basically the code is the same with the Menti poll we had previously. So I mean, if you keep opening the page, they should automatically open up the next question. So what we would like to see is where can finance have the biggest impact to promote sustainable cooling? We have a lot of discussions in here on what kind of paradigm, what kind of business model, what kind of financing models that can be utilized to promote and to push sustainable cooling, especially in Southeast Asia. But we want to see your opinion on this. So please feel free to go to the menti.com page and provide your inputs. And maybe you can also remind the audience through chat on the Menti code. We'll go back to that very soon. Or do we have it right now? Yes, it's very interesting. And we have research, guarantees, subsidies, industries, economy of scale, especially that has been touched upon by most of our panelists today. Incentive for e-appliances, commercial debt is the key, affordability, of course, and there are many impacts and keywords that have been submitted by our audiences. So while we are looking at this, I would like to invite all speakers to turn on the camera so we can have very short discussions. The presentation we have here. Basically, I'm gonna have like very similar questions to all of you, and you have bring to us some of the champions of the sustainable cooling finance business model paradigms. And basically, as you know, in our activity, and this is the first of the activities, we want to know the best sustainable cooling financing model that can be applied, especially in the Southeast Asia. So the question would be, what do you think will be the best case of financing for sustainable cooling, which is applicable especially to Southeast Asian countries? And probably very short, 1-2 minutes, just to push the nails in the coffin. And I would like to ask probably to Muhammad Zeki first.
Okay. So I think from CPI point of view, looking at the state of cooling in Indonesia, as I mentioned in my presentation, public finance can be used in so many different ways to increase the confidence of project owners and lenders in sustainable cooling. It can be used in the form of both fiscal and non-fiscal, for example, capacity building to financial institution, subsidy to interest rate for EU project, guarantee for certain project size, rebates, import duty reduction, etc. The option is diverse. And as for best practice, what we have found at the moment, I can only speak in the case of Indonesia at the moment. The government is really helping with the project pipeline readiness through funding IEA, which is very effective. It helps cutting down the cost and the process time for due diligence by financial institution that will give the financing to the project.
Thank you. Thank you very much for the concise answer from your side. Next, I would like to ask the similar question to Han Lee. What do you think the experience from Vietnam can be scaled to the Southeast Asia?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, I think in addition to a number of the financing options that I already presented, there was one more thing that I think was quite interesting is in the presentation earlier on about the cost of the appliance over the whole lifetime, and actually is cheaper for the more efficient appliance. And I think if that information is at the point of purchase for the consumers, I think that would be the best use of the information, and that is the consumer's dollars gonna vote for the best sustainable cooling option. And I think that's really worth for consideration as a policy to advertise that at the point of purchase, in addition to other large scale financing options that we have talked about.
Yes, very interesting. So we don't only think about the big public money, but also in how the commercial sectors can really blooming with the sustainable cooling. And next, I would like to ask Dimitris for the very similar question, please.
Sure, absolutely. One point that was already mentioned, which I think is key, is the opportunity to design guarantee funds to de-risk such projects, whether we're looking at servitization contracts or other contracts. There is a big risk perceived from the banking industry, and having the opportunity to de-risk those and to offer basically debt or basically funds which are more accessible for solution providers to provide these innovative business models, I think is key. And as well, I couldn't agree more with what Ms. Handley just mentioned, educating the customer on these opportunities and understanding the customer. So sometimes it's this impact on funds, which are key for them. And sometimes what we saw recently was also the having a predictive forecast of expenses for these customers are extremely important, because currently they face sometimes very volatile expenses due to energy fluctuations or maintenance fluctuations of these equipments, and having business models that enables them to have this constant, more or less, through their business as it grows, so relative to their business growth, of course, is key for them. So you offer them an ease of mindset to engage with energy efficiency.
Thank you very much, Dimitris. It's very interesting and correct, since this safety will give proper incentive for the users to really embrace this sustainable cooling. So I mean, they don't, this guarantee is gonna be making them jump into this sustainable cooling, by themselves. And last, do we still have Jim McGuire here?
I think so. I would just echo and or reinforce Dimitris's comments. I think, when I made reference to public sector, I should have qualified it. I don't think we need to look for governments to fund or to finance. I think what we need to look for is, as Demetrius has eloquently stated out, is de-risking and/or guarantees and/or non-payment structures and/or partial risk-sharing guarantee structures that allow for the private sector to invest. And we, as I said, for Indonesia right now, we've funded on investment grade audits. We want to invest. There has been a COVID-19 erosion of credit quality, and that's an issue for us. So the more that the public sector can support, whether it's the capacity training or in terms of these financial guarantees or these financial risk management instruments, I think the more you'll see capital, private capital, mobilized, and that can be at an Esco level, at a host level, or as someone like Sustainable Development Capital, we are an investor in these types of projects.
Thank you, Kim. So I think the keyword here is how we can provide this de-risking mechanism so that the private can really jump in to the market of the sustainable cooling. Thank you very much. And I would like to thank all the panelists for today's interesting discussions. And for whatever time we have left, I would like to bring the session back to Michael. Thank you very much again, for panelists. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everybody. And a wonderful session, really informative. So I'll keep this very short, and then we'll be throwing back to the main plenary session for the final presentations and summaries of what happened in the other session as well. But I think it's important just to quickly cover off on the types of discussions we've had today. So we had a great introduction from my colleague, Dr. Kevin Lane from the IEA on the baseline of sustainable cooling in the region and the potential growth in cooling demand over the next several decades, and the types of opportunities we have to head that off with good policy and good programs to ensure that cooling is delivered more sustainably. The first panel discussion, we had some excellent overview from Alvin Jose from Sustainable Energy for All, and providing that socioeconomic lens to the challenge of cooling and the potential scenarios and the growth we'll see there. Mr. Wizarud Metasid from the Thai Department of Alternative Energy Development and Efficiency provided a really good example of the range of policy tools required to deliver sustainable tooling, from standards, labeling, building codes, through to incentive programs, and a great example there. And then Catherine Hassan from CLASP provided a good overview of the state of cooling policy development in the region to date for ACs and fans, and also some of the work on harmonization. We then had a good dive into some of the details of the harmonization of cooling seasonal performance factors and other metrics for testing and compliance programs from my colleague Bintang Widana from the Asean Center for Energy. So a fantastic panel discussion there on the policies and programs and some of the core focal points there. And then the panel session we've just had really dove into some really crucial points on how to mobilize things from the market side of it, touching on some of the policy points we also didn't mention in the first discussion, but crucial ones around the role of government in helping to de-risk finance and support those innovative business models and service models that can help drive sustainable cooling. Also the roles of governments and policy in attracting international finance to help build that scale, de-risk for local lenders and investors. So a really great session. I'll leave it there so that we can get back to the plenary discussion. But thank you very much to all of our panelists, and also to Dr. Zulfikar Yunaidi as the other moderator for the session, and to all of the audience for your questions and your participation and joining in today. This workshop is just the first of many events as a part of this project. We'll have further webinars coming up and stakeholder engagement opportunities from April through to July, so please stay tuned. And we'd like your input, as I passed on in the chat. If you have good ideas for case studies on sustainable cooling, reports or data sets that can support our roadmap, please feel free to email me on the details there, michael.opperman@iea.org. So thank you very much. And without further ado, if my colleague Emily is listening, we'll be coming back very shortly to the plenary session and our group will return. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thanks, Michael. We are gonna go back to the plenary.
Thank you very much, Michael, Dr. Zulfikar, Dr. Ian, and Maxine for a really interactive discussion in both rooms. Ladies and gentlemen, we will now rejoin the breakout session summary. Please join me in welcoming Septia Buntara Supendi. He is the manager of the renewable energy and energy efficiency from ACE, and also Maxine Jordan. She is the energy analyst from the International Energy Agency.
Thank you, Nela, for the introduction. Ladies and gentlemen, we had a terrific discussion in the breakout group on the cooling roadmap. I couldn't think of a better way to begin our stakeholder consultation for this project. We discussed a number of important topics today that will be front and center in the space cooling roadmap under development. We noted several information, including electricity consumption is rising currently dramatically with significant impact on the grid. We need more and more systems to ensure the new technologies are energy efficient and support the region on energy intensity reduction. Number of regional efforts are available in the region, such as initiative from the ASEAN Center for Energy on promoting of higher efficient air conditioner through harmonization, also with other dialogue partners and international organizations. The sessions also provided a baseline of cooling in the region, for example, on AC sales, cooling's impact on electricity demand and share of peak demand and carbon emissions in the past, and different future scenarios depending on whether we take sustainable cooling path or one based on the current settings. And then we moved on to talk through the policy packages and elements that we'll discuss in the roadmap that can support sustainable space cooling in ASEAN over the past and also the coming years. We get a number of insights on the options to focus to support the finance through insurance for energy efficiency on industry and hospitality. We also noted one of the barriers from selected countries is lack of bankable project and limited project pipeline. On sustainable cooling, we also recognize it's not only we develop into a system, but also could be as a service for future development. Our two panel discussions touched on a range of crucial pieces of these puzzles, looking at the roles of different elements of space cooling policies and programs alongside business models and finance that can facilitate an energy efficient space cooling future for the region. We'll be announcing a number of cooling webinars, so please stay tuned with us. Please do get in touch with the ASEAN Center for Energy and the IEA if you have any study case, data, and policy information that you can share with us. I would like to hand over the floor to Maxine, please.
Thank you, Septia, and thank you, Nala. So in the buildings breakout session, we also had a really great discussion. The building roadmap covers 8 themes, so we covered a lot of ground, but we managed to get through talking about urban planning, new and existing buildings, materials and embodied carbon, systems and operations, materials, and clean energy. We heard about some of the some really exciting projects that are already happening in the region across those themes, and also thanks to Menti and live polls, we managed to get a snapshot of the current status of policy in the region and policy gaps, as well as discussing some of the potential solutions that we'll be exploring further as we develop the buildings roadmap. So in the first session, we discussed new and existing buildings and systems and operations. And in the second session, we covered materials, urban planning and resilience, and clean energy. Some of the key points that came out across both of these sessions was around the need for both a top-down approach and a bottom-up approach. So we heard from a lot of different projects that are already happening at both of these levels, and sort of reinforcing the need for more integration across different levels of national and municipal level implementation, and how ultimately buildings action can support defining and reaching NDCs, as we saw through the progress on the Vietnam buildings roadmap. Another key point was around data, data being a challenge to enable the development of benchmarks and the baseline. However, it was also highlighted that a lot of data is already here, given the number of initiatives already going on. Therefore, we really look forward to building on these. And we launched our sort of, called it a knowledge base collaboration website, where we hope to encourage users and stakeholders to contribute some of the reports that they're using, some of the data sets that they're coming across, to really be a bit more coordinated in how we use information and activities that are already going on. So I think I'll stop there on the main points from the session in the interest of time, but wanted to highlight the launch of this website that we'll be sharing with all of the participants. And we also launched a survey to gather additional data and additional insights into, again, the current status of policy, and just diving a little bit deeper into the topics that we talked about today. We'll also be following up with a number of buildings webinars as for cooling. So we really are looking forward to keeping this conversation going, as this is just the beginning. So thank you again to all of our excellent speakers and to our audience for sharing their insights and getting this work off the ground. So thank you. I'll hand back now to Nella.
Thank you very much, Septia and Maxine. Before I end this workshop, I would like to invite Melanie Slade from International Energy Agency to deliver the first closing remarks.
Thank you, Nella. I just wanted to say thanks, everybody. Thanks for all of your time, your interest in this work, and hopefully before becoming collaborators in this work going forward. So I won't take up any more of your time, but thanks to the sponsors and our chair people and all of the participants. And we look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you very much, Melanie. For the second closing remarks, now I would like to turn over the microphone to Marigel Desagon. She is the head of Energy and Minerals Division from the ASEAN Secretariat.
Hi, thank you, Nella. Good afternoon to everyone. I'm honored to briefly speak for the ASEAN Secretariat in this virtual workshop this afternoon, and to have had the opportunity to listen firsthand to the discussions, inputs, and insights put forward in this first of a series of important stakeholder engagements to draft the very first ASEAN roadmaps for EE buildings and cooling. As mentioned earlier during the opening, these drafts will be considered by ASEAN member states as the region works to achieve the ambitious targets set forth in the ASEAN's Energy Sectoral Work Plan, which we commonly call APAYEC. The ASEAN Secretariat joins in thanking our speakers, experts, moderators, organizers, and all stakeholders who have actively participated this afternoon, and those who will continue to engage with us going forward as ASEAN threshes out the draft roadmaps further. We acknowledge, of course, the participation of the 10 ASEAN member states, led today by Thailand, Dr. Pongpan as the able chair of the ECSSN, and Brunei Darussalam, Mr. Abdul Salam, who is hosting this week's series of EEs and CSSN meetings. We thank the audience and stakeholders all over the region and beyond who have taken time to be with us today. And we hope that we will continue to capture your interest and support. And of course, by saying that, to continue to engage with the surveys and also the requests for information that IEA and ACE have been mentioning earlier. we would also want to express once again our collective appreciation from the ASEAN Secretariat's end towards the Australian government, earlier represented by Mr. Adrian Gilbert from the Australian mission, and who we have also worked with along with his team to get this project started with IEA. The Australian government has consistently supported ASEAN economic community building, and this is the fourth project on energy that AADCP has supported consistently and without much fanfare, and which also happens to be supportive of ASEAN's collective goals relating to greener recovery from the pandemic. Huge appreciation also goes to IEA, especially Ms. Melanie Slade and Emily's team for this specific project. And we, of course, depend on IEA for the primary delivery of this project and its collaboration with ACE, our ASEAN Center for Energy colleagues, who have been instrumental in helping convene today's workshop and moving this also forward in the succeeding stakeholder engagements. We hope everyone will continue to be engaged and through April to June this year. And the aim is for us to have a sufficiently firm draft by September that would have heard a wider set of stakeholders and that would help guide ASEAN's cooperation towards greater efficiency in cooling, building, and even in construction sectors. This afternoon impressed upon me the breadth of cross-sectoral, both horizontal and vertical engagements that are needed to get these roadmaps through and to get them actually implemented. And all in the service of our common interests and the undeniable imperative for sustainable energy transitions in our region and every corner of the globe. Once again, thank you and have a good day or afternoon or evening to all. Back to you, Nella.
Thank you very much, Mary. Next, I would like to invite Dr. Pongpan Farasayan to give the last closing remarks. He is the chair of the Energy Efficiency and Conservation Subsector Network from Thailand.
Thank you, Nella. Good afternoon to you all once again. With the end of the workshop, on behalf of the Department of Alternative Energy Development and Efficiency, Thailand as a E&C SSN coordinator, I believe that we all have discussed and deliberate on various aspects of the roadmap on energy efficiency, on energy efficiency in building and cooling. I also would like to thank our panelists and moderator, IEA colleague in both breakout session and both panelist session for your expertise and case study. Thank you all participants for your attending and thanks for coming out in number. I hope you get some useful information, ideas, recommendations back home. Last but not least, this workshop cannot happen and wonderfully succeed without such a great collaboration between Australian Mission to ASEAN, IEA, ASEAN Secretariat, ACE, and the host country, Brunei Darussalam. I would like to take this opportunity to express my sincere appreciation to all of you for your hard work, and we look forward to the coming activities, recommendation, and roadmap of both building and cooling under this project. I wish all of you a pleasant day and stay safe. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, everyone. Ladies and gentlemen, that wraps up our workshop for today. On behalf of the organizer of this workshop, thank you all for making time in your busy schedules to join us here this afternoon. I wish everyone here a pleasant day and evening. Bye-bye.